Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. So since Classic WoW was announced last year at BlizzCon, there's been a lot of questions about what type of experience we're going to get. And one of the biggest things I've been wondering about is how fast or slow do you think Blizzard should release all the content that is available to players in Classic? And based on what I've seen from Classic forums, Reddit, and other places, it feels like for the most part people are in two separate groups. For example, some people want Blizzard to have all the content available at launch and just let players go through at their own pace. And while this seems interesting, if you think about players racing into AQ40 with greens and blues, I feel like this would ultimately decrease the longevity of the game itself and not really provide a good cohesive experience. And at the same time, the other majority of people really want Blizzard to give us the original experience, which would be progression based, and we would go from the beginning patch to the end. And while this would be my personal choice, my main concern is how fast are players going to clear the content, and how long should the timeline be in Classic compared to Vanilla. So altogether, Vanilla lasted about 2 years, give or take a few months, but by the end of 2006, we ended up with about 12 patches, featuring new dungeons, raids, items, class reworks, and just so much more. So to say the least, Blizzard was doing a lot during this time, and releasing a new content patch every couple months or so. But looking back at everything in hindsight today, we have to remember that the content isn't new anymore, so if Blizzard is going to do a progressive based experience, then should we follow the original timeline, or a accelerated timeline to adjust for everything that players know today? When we take a look at the original timeline and the release dates for each patch, for the most part everything was pretty well paced and consistent. But there are a few areas in the timeline that make me wonder if maybe they're a bit too long or short, and how this is going to affect Classic. So assuming that for this video we follow two conditions in which number 1, we should expect all content to be cleared much faster than Vanilla, and number 2, Blizzard is planning future expansions if Classic is successful, which means TBC after Naxxramas, then we should probably focus on the time span between each 40-man raid. So for example, the time between release and Blackmoon Lair was longer for North American and Australian players by 3 months, because the game didn't actually come out until early 2005 for Europe. And one of my biggest concerns is that if players have to wait 8 months for Blackmoon Lair, then they might start running out things to do, and given what we've seen on private servers today, where most of the content is cleared very quickly and on the same day release, even on the best scripted servers, I feel that we should be cautious about giving players too much time in Classic, but at the same time giving everyone enough time to not feel rushed, so there has to be a compromise somewhere in my opinion. And at the same time, there were 4 patches that were released before Blackmoon Lair, which raises another question if there is content that should already be in the game at launch, such as the Marathon dungeon that came out a month after release that's mostly used by players that are leveling, and some that are trying to get pre-Biscuit at 60. Or how about the PvP honor system and Battlegrounds? Both of these systems provided a lot of rewards to players and had a huge impact on the game, but where did they fit in the Classic timeline? Though arguably the best content patch during this time is Dire Maul with 3 dungeons, and a lot of rewards for players at 60, not to mention getting access to role buffs, which are a huge boost for raiding guilds. So out of these patches, and something that we need to think about in the future is if some of this content should or should not be in the game at release, which depends on how important it is for the overall experience. So altogether, this part of Classic is going to be a very important time of setting the stage for how the rest of the game goes. And I believe that 5 to 6 months is the right amount of time to get everyone at 60, into dungeons, and eventually raiding, in preparation for the next tier of content. The second area that we need to discuss is the time between Blackmoon Lair and AQ40, which arguably is pretty solid, because the amount of content between these 2 raids is huge. With Blackmoon Lair, we get our next 40-man raid, which should keep players busy for some time, which is then followed up by the 20-man raid featuring Zul'Gurub, which has a lot of rewards and cool stuff for the players, and they're probably going to be busy grinding that reputation out to Exalted for probably a couple months. At the same time, Arathi Basin Arise, which is a new battleground for the players that enjoy PvP, along with a new faction that features alternative rewards for players that are interested in getting them. And then we have the Emerald Dragons patch for 1.8 that brings a lot of world PvP, and some really nice gear that players can use in AQ40 or for a very long time. So to say the least, it's a lot of content that hits players in about 5.5 months if we go by the original timeline. And to be honest, I wouldn't mind if it was extended to 6 months or more given everything that happens past this point in Classic. And with patch 1.9, we enter the second half of the game, and before players can go into AQ, they have to complete the war efforts, which will probably take your server a few weeks to complete. With AQ20 and AQ40, both of these are good raids with more challenging mechanics, but I expect both will probably be cleared in a few weeks by most progression raid guilds. Which means if we go by the original timeline, then there's about 3 or 4 months until Nax arrives. And considering that patch 1.10 is small with just weather effects and tier 0.5, and that makes me wonder if Naxxramas should actually come out faster, or should the amount of time remain the same. And arguably I could probably see this going both ways, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you guys think about this. But personally, from my perspective, I like to see a short amount of time between these two raids, which would keep a lot of guilds on their toes and help provide a good challenge for the last and best raid of the game. So when it comes to talking about Naxxramas and TBC, we start getting really deep into speculation, but assuming the TBC is planned sometime after Classic ends, then how long of a wait are we actually in for? In the original timeline, there was about 5.5 months until the TBC pre-patch in December 2006, with the expansion coming out in January 2007. But the problem is we don't know how long it would take Blizzard to create a TBC server, and this length of time could be extended or shortened, which would depend on how much time and resources they need for this project. So I feel like going with the original timeline is the best situation here, since it gives people plenty of time to clear Naxxramas and wrap up anything they have left to do. Not to mention that this would give new players time to level a character up to 60 if they skip Classic, but they're going to be playing TBC from day one. So putting everything together, guys, the progressive experience is very promising, and there's so much content in Classic that players are definitely guaranteed 1 to 2 years of reliving the dream. And whether you're for the original timeline, the accelerated timeline, or something else entirely, it's mostly a matter of how all this content should be delivered to the community in the end. But with that being said, that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for this video. So as always, thank you guys for watching to the end, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.